Alright, so this is going to be one of the most exciting Free Coaching Fridays we've had. Welcome to the stream. My name is Nato Riley, and this is my YouTube channel. We'll turn the music down. And let's do Free Coaching Friday today. Every Friday, I have been doing free coaching for cybersecurity, so I run a cybersecurity community group. The group is in Facebook. It's called the Nato Squad, and if you are in the Facebook group, then you can chat with me. That's the chat that I follow while I'm doing this, since it's just so many questions that I get anyways. So if you do have questions, you can go ahead and look in the description below if you're watching on YouTube and you want to join the chat, and you can see that there's a link to the Facebook group if you want to come chat with me over here on Facebook, because I stream to both, because that's something that I've been doing lately as well. We're making some big announcements because we're going to be talking about DevSecOps today. And so I don't know if any of you even know what DevSecOps is, but if you don't, you're going to learn what DevSecOps is today, because that has been basically the core of everything that I've been getting questions about all week long. And so what I normally do is I take people's questions and then I answer them. And then since lately I've been getting a lot of the same questions, since I do run a company, we're actually doing some things to see if we can help some people out in some more ways. Things like how to build a business for cheaper, how to learn cybersecurity cheaper, how to make it more affordable to get into the industry, all these things, and how to learn the technical skills. I get the questions of how do you learn the technical skills all day long. That's the endless question that I get. So what you're looking at on my screen is lately we've been developing open source software, and this is a little login. If I log in here, and this is a development lab of mine where I develop things. And for some of you who already know what you're looking at, then that's great. And then for those of you who don't, you're going to know what you're looking at. But I'm going to start providing a little bit of context about why am I going to be showing this today? What does this have to do with Free Coaching Friday? So the questions I've been getting lately have been a lot about how do you teach technical skills? How in the world do you teach the technical skills? Because a lot of those who I've been working with who were once getting jobs, a lot of you are now at the point where you have jobs, and now I'm starting to get fewer questions. Well, I still get the ocean of questions about how to get in the cybersecurity industry. If you want to get in the cybersecurity, the easiest way in is we actually, if you look in the link below, have something called the Pi'd Hacker Experience Prerequisites package. It's free. It'll get you a job. So now I kind of focus on those who I've been helping, and now they are in cybersecurity jobs. So if you want to learn what I used to teach, then look at the Pi'd Hacker Prereqs, and that teaches all of the things that you need to know to get into the industry, be a person who's ready to roll, understands how cybersecurity works, all that good stuff. It's all packaged into one nice little neat thing. It's free. And that's just there for anyone who wants to get into cybersecurity. You want to learn cybersecurity. But for those who are already in the industry, now your questions are more like, hey, how do I teach people the technical skills? Because I don't even know how to, I learned the technical stuff. Now I'm trying to teach this to people, and it's harder to teach it than I thought. Yes, it's complicated. Teaching cybersecurity stuff is complicated. It used to be really expensive to do that. And I get questions about like what hosting platform should you pay for? Should you use AWS? Should you not use AWS? Should you just buy everyone Raspberry Pis? I just get the range of questions now. Like I get that one a lot. How do you teach people the technical skills? And then also questions like how do you vet out the technical skills? I've been getting that one a lot lately as well. So some of you are working with businesses to basically do talent acquisition to help businesses get people who know how to do the development work, and you're asking me how do you know if someone has the proper technical skills? And then the other one is for those of you who are like, well, how do you teach people the technical skills, especially like hosting, because hosting can get kind of expensive. So one of the things that we do often, something that we do day in and day out, is something called DevSecOps. And DevSecOps is something that essentially, effectively teaches just about anyone, just basically cybersecurity. So, and let me explain. This is a really interesting thing. DevSecOps. DevSecOps might be the most valuable security philosophy out there in 2020. And I'm going to say that because DevSecOps requires you to learn the cybersecurity skills, learn cybersecurity stuff. DevSecOps requires you to learn how to do the engineering, and then it requires you to learn how to teach the engineering after doing the training yourself, and then learning how to like recreate and then do tests and then simulation labs and all this stuff. And then basically you test before you produce. And so you basically have a test environment and a production environment. And DevSecOps is, how do you basically develop security operations? And so before security operations go into what's called production, there has to be this thing called DevSecOps. And so with everyone asking me lately, hey, what's an affordable way to teach people cybersecurity? Well, DevSecOps tools are expensive. DevSecOps programs are expensive. Training tools are even more expensive. However, if you go into the realm of open source, and I mean completely open source everything, then you can basically use a Raspberry Pi or like one free low-powered Google Cloud VM and build yourself an educational environment, basically a test environment. And then you'd effectively use DevSecOps tools and methodologies to teach people cybersecurity. And since DevSecOps is what you use to pretty much implement every single security measure at a company, then if you want to teach someone how to implement SIM, then have them run a bunch of DevSecOps for SIM practices and SIM technologies. And then by the end of the DevSecOps, you also end up with tools that you can implement, which is a little different from training because DevSecOps ends with tools being developed. But I honestly find a value in using DevSecOps over just teaching people like, hey, let's go through this lab. Let's go do Hack the Box. I think Hack the Box is great. I think some of these other things are great. But you can actually do the real thing and just learn cybersecurity doing this thing called DevSecOps. And you can do this for free. And actually, you can use our Olympiad engine, which is built purely on... It's our Olympiad threat intelligence engine, which is built purely out of open source tools. So anyways, I'm going to show you how you can basically use DevSecOps to teach people and create like test environments. But also to kind of go into that, I do want to talk about where we've been, what we've been doing, what you're looking at, because this DevSecOps thing, we're all about it, and I'd like you to know where this came from. So check this out. Bear with me while I'm gonna make some big announcements right now. So one of the biggest announcements ever is that we have a 3D printer. So Jordan has worked with us. This is Jordan. Jordan is our CTO. He has worked with us to basically create things with us and for us. And so he built this 3D printer, and we tested all kinds of things with that 3D printer. And, tried making frogs and whistles, all kinds of stuff. And something that we now are working on is prototyping our own cases. And so this is because basically we use Raspberry Pis for DevSecOps. We have a program called Pi'd Hacker Experience. It's all DevSecOps, and I use this whenever I teach people stuff. Anyways, everything I do is practically DevSecOps. People are like, oh, how do you know how to prepare for classes so quickly? DevSecOps. Hey, how do you teach your classes so well when you have no idea what lesson to teach people? I teach them DevSecOps. They're like, well, what's your backup lesson plan? DevSecOps. They're like, well, what's your methodology and philosophy for teaching classes that aren't DevSec? I use DevSecOps anyways. It's honestly just one of, so we're going to talk about DevSecOps. It's a development philosophy, really, at its core. But as part of development security operations, we're going in so deep that we're creating our own appliances, which then we can teach anyone how to do all of this stuff. And, DevSecOps, we're going to talk about what that is. But we are building appliances and tools for DevSecOps that basically work with Raspberry Pis. So, once we started getting some of these, let's take a look at some of the other images we got here from our development. So we started testing out different types of thermal things, different types of ways to have efficient DevSecOps development systems in your home. And so we figured if we're standardizing DevSecOps for ourselves, we might as well just teach everyone else how to do this stuff for free, because that's just what we do. And then if you want to work with us and stuff like that, great, whatever. But if you want to print these kinds of things yourself or learn how to engineer this stuff yourself, this is just what we do. This is the kind of stuff that we talk about on Free Coaching Fridays. And this is our cybersecurity community is the DIY Hackers Guild. And by DIY, I mean DIY down to the bone, right? DIY everything. We modify, we print our own stuff. And so this is a modified Pi system, and that metal piece, or that black piece right there, that's a giant heat sink, like the size of the entire Pi that we're using, because we overclock these systems and we hack hardware. So we hack hardware, we hack software, and then we use hacking basically to build hacking tools. And then these tools we use as Purple Team solutions, and we do DevSecOps. So, and all this is ethical hacking. It's all open source ethical hacking, and you can create your own DevSecOps ethical hacking tools. So this is what I do for a living, and so now we're just sharing what we do for a living with everyone, because people ask about this stuff, and I've been getting so many training questions like, how do I train people stuff? Teach them the DevSecOps stuff. So anyways, DevSecOps starts at the foundation of, making sure that you understand things like provisioning and understanding that you have the right systems and the right hardware and the right things to do DevSecOps with in the first place. So we're working on our hardware ecosystems and using Power over Ethernet and Raspberry Pi 4s, and we are using, let's see, so the Raspberry Pi 4 can actually boot from a solid-state hard drive for anyone who is up to systems. For anyone who hasn't built computers or anything like that before, then some of this stuff might seem a little alien. But basically, we're just building little DevSecOps systems, and then finally, our later revisions have gotten a lot more sophisticated from there. And thanks to Jordan and his fine work. So this is all very exciting stuff for us, and hopefully it's exciting stuff for you too. And then I'll check the chat in a bit here, but I just want to make some of these announcements because we actually have an insane amount of stuff that we've done, which is, if you've noticed, the Facebook group and my LinkedIn has not been as active as it normally would have been in the past and things like that. But that's because we are trying to really make it easier to learn cybersecurity. We're trying to make it easier to learn how to work with technology. We're trying to make it easier to learn how to work with hardware. We're trying to make stuff possible for folks who don't have a computer science degree from Harvard. Because you don't need one if you know the things that you just need to know. That's the way that I'll put that, I guess. That's probably a good way to put that. So, anyways, oh yeah, and something else that's pretty neat for you, if for anyone who's like a serious hardware file out there, we are actually using Noctua fans with Raspberry Pi systems. So if anyone knows what a Noctua fan is, it's a really nice cooling solution. But then yeah, this system sits upright, and it looks good. So this is just the beginning, okay? This is just us getting started. And so then, of course, you know, this has to have something on it. So there you go. So you host things on it. And even more exciting, it's let's see if I can get this. There we go. Look at that. So we've got our system over here, right? And yeah, there you go. So this is what we've been building if you are watching the screen at this time. And we've been building this stuff for a very long time. But it's as you can see, it's finally actually starting to come together. And so yeah, and hello from Japan, and also hello from we're from the United States. Yeah, so everything's been coming together, and we are making DevSecOps easier, basically. So our program, Pi'd Hacker Experience, is all based off of DevSecOps. So that's one way to learn DevSecOps. But I'm going to talk about DevSecOps in general today, and I'm just going to leave our new. This is called the Olympiad system. If you want to know how to build the software that we're going to be staring at here real quick, because I've been just getting a lot of questions on what are some ways to learn the technical stuff of cybersecurity. Well, you can learn it for free. You can go to our website, which is noshapoint.com. It's in the link below. If you go to the link below, there's noshapoint.com, our website. But if you go to where it says DIY for engineers, or for DIY engineers, I mean, we're all DIY. We're DIY everything. We make you name it. We make our own operating systems. We make our own systems. We make everything. Everything we do, we make it, and we make it all with DevSecOps. So, because people have been asking, well, how come you're able to do whatever you want? DevSecOps. It's all DevSec. Everything I do is DevSecOps. If anything that's not DevSecOps, I kind of stay away from, because I can't. It's DevSecOps ends with automation. But we have this thing called the Olympiad, so you can check out the Olympiad. That's what our little appliance is, and it has a little introduction to the Olympiad. We have a white paper for what's called the Inner Athena, which is a threat intelligence engine, is what that is called. But this walks you through engineering the little platform that I'm using right now. So that's what I'm using. I'm using the Olympiad. We are going to make the Olympiad a lot more accessible here soon, but I just want to talk about DevSecOps and why it kind of lets you do just about anything. Because DevSecOps is the development security operations for making anything technical in a cybersecurity program, and it can be kind of a confusing thing. And thank you for the compliments on the open source stuff. We've been working on it. So before I show exactly what DevSecOps is, let's talk about the two elements of it. Let's do a little whiteboarding, actually, because I just keep saying it. It's such a fun word to say. You're gonna have that word stuck in your head by the time I'm done talking about DevSecOps. I'm even gonna label it DevSecOps and make a little whiteboard. And DevSecOps, what is it? What is this? So there are a couple of things that make up DevSecOps, because I use a technology called SIM, but there's a lot of things that go into how I develop anything, and how any team that I've worked with, how I help them develop anything. And there is one portion of that says we have what's called infrastructure as code. So this is one thing that's really important in something called DevSecOps. That's pretty important stuff, or pretty helpful anyways. Time saving and simplifies stuff. Then we have security as code. So this pairing right here gives us, let's see, so we've got infrastructure as code, security as code. Oh, and actually this works. So for anyone who's watching YouTube and sending me questions, thank you. So I got a question sent to me from YouTube from one of our members. Are Android and iOS penetration testing projects demanded, and what are some good resources to learn it? So iOS and penetration testing projects, actually, exactly what I'm teaching. That's what I'm going to say. There are reasons for that. So Android and iOS penetration testing projects. So this question right here goes this is exactly why I'm teaching everyone DevSecOps. What are some good resources to learn it? Pay attention to what I'm teaching. Those are some good resources to learn it. And then what I can do, since this question was asked here, is I can kind of orient DevSecOps for that question, since someone just threw a use case at us, for us to be like, DevSecOps, because that's the answer to everything that I've been getting asked lately. And so we need to talk about it more, because it's not talked about enough on the internet, I guess, which is, I don't even think I've heard a lot of people talk about this. So to kind of relate this infrastructure as code and security as code to this question about Android and iOS penetration testing projects. So iOS is infrastructure. Basically you have a phone, right? And so DevSecOps says that we can learn with infrastructure as code. So already we're starting to put some answers to this question with DevSecOps. And then security as code. So this is where we have pen testing, automation, and tools. And this can even include things like software firewalls, right? So maybe I'll just even add a direct example of this, like a software firewall. We have these things where we can save this architecture. And so we have these tools in the world nowadays, open source tools. And we're going to say we have open source solutions that basically make it possible for us to teach ourselves things like, how do you hack a cell phone? So if a cell phone is infrastructure means like any device. So infrastructure, any device. So that could be PC, cell phone, even a smart TV. Doesn't really matter what it is. That's infrastructure, right? So what we're saying is we can simulate or emulate infrastructure, especially if you're trying to learn it, because that's directly connected to the question that I was addressing earlier. These questions about, how do you teach it? How do you learn it? Well, you can learn it the same way that it's easier to teach it with open source solutions, where you can simulate infrastructure with code, basically things that let you do this more easily. And then we have this thing called, security as code. And one great tool that kind of brings this together for if you're new to this stuff. Now, we get deeper and deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole with some of this stuff, but I'm just going to outright say Docker is an outstanding solution, we're going to get into why and how this works. We're still going to talk about what is DevSecOps, but we're going to talk about DevSecOps with Docker. So let's be a little specific as we're going, and I do want to just say and specify that you can do DevSecOps with just about anything. DevSecOps is a philosophy. Let me actually so it's a philosophy around these concepts of infrastructure as code and security as code, which that's a really confusing thing. This is dedicated data science and computer science. Like this is the stuff that you learn like in a university or something, or if you're just doing the job working at like Google, or you're working at like some big company, or who knows, it doesn't really matter. Companies that have DevSecOps have DevSecOps. So it doesn't mean that you have to use Docker, but we're going to use Docker, especially for beginners. And I'll talk about kind of how we do DevSecOps too, versus what I'm going to recommend for beginners. Some other tools that go with that is a Docker tool called Portainer, which is a very nice DevSecOps tool, because between Docker and Portainer we can actually kind of start to build infrastructure as code and security as code. But let's kind of understand what these philosophies mean. Now, let me reiterate before I talk about the philosophy a little more. So if we're going to talk about some philosophy, some computing development security operation philosophy, then it does start with this idea that we want to be able to do things quickly, rapidly, and we now have these solutions that allow us to significantly expedite our ability to test things and make sure that we can do things like quality assurance or DevSecOps. Quality assurance is kind of like DevSecOps. So if you've ever worked a quality assurance job, you're a hop and a skip away from being a DevSecOps professional. So we'll learn that in a bit. So let's take a look at the elements of DevSecOps. So what makes up the DevSecOps philosophy? So I'm going to list 5 core things that come with the philosophy of DevSecOps, just to kind of have an idea of like, what is it? Why do we do it? Who cares? Why is this the answer to learning everything? And how can I learn everything with DevSecOps? So if DevSecOps, if we break it up into 5 different items. First, let's say that we want to either start a cybersecurity program, or build a security product, or build some IT solutions that involve security and have some security requirements. Doesn't really matter. Let's say that we have something that is continuous. So, and I should specify continuous development. Continuous development, where this is, we're creating something that's going to just run, right? That could be like a cloud infrastructure, that could be a whole data center. Well, we want to decide, is this thing that we're developing for, is this going to be a continuous thing that just runs? Now, is DevSecOps necessary for something that's not continuous? Not necessarily, but cybersecurity as an industry is all about continuous traffic, continuous data, continuous everything. And it's a networking thing. It's cybersecurity, IT, networking, information security. So it's got to be ongoing. It's not like the same as developing a video game, right? a video game is something that you create it, you package it, and then you send it to people. Now, it might be a little different if we're talking about like an MMORPG, like World of Warcraft versus Zelda. Zelda's not an MMORPG, if anyone knows what Zelda is, and if anyone's heard of World of Warcraft, that's this massive online, massively multiplayer online game that's always online. So someone has to do DevSecOps for World of Warcraft. Believe it or not, there's legalities behind that. Someone can actually go to jail if DevSecOps doesn't get done for World of Warcraft. I'm going to write that down because that's an interesting fact. There's some stuff that goes into it. It has to do with... I won't get into that, but this is true. So someone can go to jail if World of Warcraft has no DevSecOps. Now that's conditional. There's some conditions to it. So that's a tricky thing. There's a whole lot that would go into what would cause someone to go into jail over a lack of DevSecOps. But that's a thing because it's continuous. So let me just close this. So let's just emphasize how important DevSecOps is. And then it must be something that generally involves some form of compliance or standardization. So, and it's for the purpose of scale, right? So DevSecOps is for continuous programs that generally need to scale. And the purpose of standardization with things that grow and are big is you see big companies, they start to have corporate compliance, and things that start to get larger and larger and larger, they have to have these structures that can be, you know, tested and maintained and measured and move around a certain way and all this crazy stuff, right? And so cybersecurity, we have, you know, DevSecOps used to not be something that would matter to a small business or even a medium-sized business, but now that we're in the age of like big data and all this crazy stuff, we need DevSecOps these days. Like if you use the cloud, DevSecOps is now relevant to you. Once upon a time, we didn't all need this stuff, but like this is the modern world, folks. Like you kind of need to know some DevSecOps in 2020 if we're talking cybersecurity. And when people are talking about the skills, you have to know like enough of everything to be able to do DevSecOps. DevSecOps should be a foundation. If you can't do DevSecOps, you're gonna have to learn it eventually anyways if you're doing technical work, no matter what. So if you learn it first off, it makes the rest of your cybersecurity experience easier because you're going to deal with scaling at some point in cybersecurity, and you're going to deal with compliance and standardization at some point in cybersecurity. It's kind of an unavoidable thing. You can't really get around that. And, you know, if you've ever worked in the military or government, like you're just locked down by it. It's everywhere around you. And of course, government systems are continuous. So the next thing that we care about when we're talking about, you know, what in the all living wonder is DevSecOps. The next thing that we need is it has to be something that can be So we have to have something that can be tested regularly and reliably. And then we have to basically testing must be done separately from production. And then we have to have so at the end of the day, you have to know why in the world you would pen test something in the first place, because some folks don't even know why they would pen test something. They learn the pen testing skills, but not why they would learn it. And if you learn DevSecOps, it makes it easier to learn pen testing. If you learn DevSecOps, it makes it easier to learn cloud. It makes it easier to learn everything. Because DevSecOps is the practice of building tools for continuous development for things that scale and things that are, standardized, and they basically must be like the same thing over and over again at scale. So notice in the bottom left corner of my screen here, we're creating something that we can just continuously produce, and then over time, standardize it and scale it up, both from a hardware standpoint, which is actually not quite DevSecOps. It's called provisioning when we're talking about deciding on hardware and stuff. So we're doing our own provisioning if we're talking about the little Pi system down there. That's us setting up some provisioning for being able to do the DevSecOps. So provisioning is setting up like the hardware and stuff. But these are tools that are designed to help with continuous development. And then you need to be able to test regularly and reliably before and separately from production, which means that anything that you put out into like a production environment has to have been tested and vetted out and all those different things. And then finally, you actually have to have a process from like getting the validation from your test environment. Like, okay, the test environment worked. The test was good. Sweet. This is awesome. This is amazing. Test good. Over to, all right, now we have to get this, this successful test over into the production environment. And then that's called change management. So we do all of this with a Raspberry Pi ecosystem, because you can cluster Raspberry Pis together, and interestingly enough, you can do enterprise engineering for DevSecOps on a Raspberry Pi 4, because the Raspberry Pi 4 is powerful enough with an overclock to do DevSecOps with enterprise level tools. And the cool thing about DevSecOps is that, your SecOps needs to be in, or like your DevOps in general need to be in more of a test environment. Raspberry Pi is just a box. You can either have just like a Pi by itself, or you can have like a cluster of Pis that's separate. And I remember when I worked in a lab doing a lot of DevSecOps work, I had 2 laptops that were just old laptops that people retired. We had employees, it's like every 3 years they get a new laptop. So we took two junker laptops, clustered those 2 junker laptops together, and that was how we did DevSecOps. I'm like, come on. That was how I did DevSecOps back in the day. Let me show you here. This is how I developed artificial intelligence. This is how I tested all my pen testing stuff. This is how you name it. It doesn't really matter what I did. I did it all with DevSecOps. What my desk used to look like. This is going to be a hideous drawing here. We're going to take a look at my old engineering station. I had a series of cubicles, and one was my desk and one was my lab. So this is me, 2 cubicles here. So this was my old DevSecOps center. I should just like see if I have an actual picture of it somewhere. But what we're doing right now is like infinitely more advanced than what I was doing in the office. So there's my chair. It's got little legs. That's a chair. It's a really ugly chair, I guess. That's like a cushiony back, whatever. And this is my desk where I do my development. And then over here, this is going to be 2 really ugly laptops. So we have laptop 1. And then we have this other hideous laptop right here. Oh, yeah. And we had a little switch right here. And so we had them wrangled over to this switch over here. So we can label these. So we've got ugly laptops here. So we've got 1 ugly laptop and 2 ugly laptops. And we have this ugly switch, because that's pretty sweet. That's pretty legit. So this is nice. And this is then what let me network with my little desktop here. Can't even really see it, but that's supposed to be a desktop behind my chair. Can't even tell, but that's what it is. So we've got my desktop. We got these ugly laptops, and my desktop had unique access connected to this ugly switch that was separate from the rest of the business, so that it could talk with this separate little environment that was separate from the rest of the business. So I could just like draw like this little entire desk over here is just isolated, which maybe I'll choose a different color. I'll just make it green. So this switch gave us a little network, this little green network right here. And then the desktop basically had access to the green network right here. And then we're going to represent the business network as like Wi-Fi or whatever. There we go. So it's getting Wi-Fi, internet. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but the whole point here is then we have the company internet here. So what these are like two security environments. So I'm gonna label them now. So we've got this hideous test environment, test security environment, and then we have the production environment. And this was how I architected my job. This is where I automated my work in this little ecosystem here. I wrote all kinds of crazy scripts in this little ecosystem right here. All kinds of random things. But this is, at the end of the day, DevSecOps in sort of like a drawing visual representation. You can't really see this little, there we go, production environment. Now you can see that other sticky note. But yeah, this hideous representation right here is what it used to be. And now our test environment is, so what we're doing here is with the Raspberry Pi, we're saying that this would be like there you go, bam. That's DevSecOps. Right there. And that would mean that whatever you're creating, you have two versions of it. Or maybe two versions, or I don't know, two versions, whatever. Yeah, there we go. That's the way that we'll do that. Two versions. You get two versions of an environment, and one's for testing, one's for making sure that you can learn your stuff, all that fun stuff, and then the other one is so that you can, well, that's your production environment. That's DevSecOps. And then that brings us to, we have to have the hardware, right? And we're replacing that stuff. So now let's talk about the next part of DevSecOps. Because this is how we develop production cybersecurity and all that good stuff for the most part. It's just a really agile, lightweight way to operate. And this stuff, buying tools for this can be expensive, but you can open source all this stuff now, which is sweet, which is why we open source it all. So you can use our open source if you want. Now, let's get to the software side of it. So that was more like the hardware side of it. So what about like, what's the software like? I don't know, I'll just label this what about software. So if on one end, we're talking about we have the hardware environments, what if I told you that we could also, kind of like Inception a little bit, but like not only could we have everything running in a series of Raspberry Pis, because we could have, say, you know, 2 Raspberry Pis to learn clustering, but what if you only have 1 Raspberry Pi? You can actually build a test environment inside of things like Docker, which is why we're going to talk about Docker. So the other thing we can do here is we can just say Docker, and then we can have Docker installed on a Raspberry Pi. And then if you look at this little representation here, then we can have the, like 2 little computers, which we would then label as, you know, containers. And then deciding on our architecture is called provisioning. Do we want to use 2 Raspberry Pis? Do we want to use 1 Raspberry Pi with a whole bunch of containers? Do we want to cluster containers and Raspberry Pis? Do we want to cluster containers and Raspberry Pis together? What do we want to do? Anxiety. Crippling anxiety. Too many options. Anyways, there's a reason why I'm wearing a shirt that says I have crippling anxiety. Because there's too many options. That's why. But anyways, DevSecOps is kind of the art of knowing, you know, when and why and what and how to choose from which, and, you know, what might be more optimal for this type of company and what might be more optimal for that type of company, which is why we focus on the philosophy of it all, which if we go back to the philosophies of it all before we go back to the software side of it, is, you know, is this something, you know, is our production environment something that's continuous, right? Is our production environment something that's continuous? Does it involve compliance and standardization for scale? Is it tested regularly and reliably? Testing must be done separately from the production environment. You know, change management and configuration management. We have to figure out how to do all of these, and we have to figure out how to stay on budget and be able to work with the resources that we had. And, you know, in the scenario that I was in with when I was working at the company, and I'm even going to cover it, Docker even had to take over my switch and had to pretty much, nowadays I'm saying that I use Docker to act as my switch. There we go. You can use Docker to act as your switch, so you don't need to get a little switch to try to connect your little separate ecosystem to, or a separate router, or a separate LAN or VLAN. I don't know. There's all this crazy stuff you can try to do, but when you start to save everything in a tool called Docker, this brings us to the software side of things, which Docker brings us to this idea of having the potential to be able to do infrastructure as code. Now, there's more than Docker. There's a tool called Terraform, which is something that we're going to be using at some point. But even if you don't want to get into using tools like Puppet or Terraform or something along those lines, Docker has something called infrastructure as code, and that lives, you know, in things like if you've ever heard of Docker Hub. I'll go to Docker Hub right now, and I'll show you some of our infrastructure as code. As a matter of fact, we have infrastructure as code, and then the other part is we have to have a way to also have. So what if you wanted to have firewalls in everything, right? So maybe we want infrastructure as code, security as code. I'm just going to put Docker Hub here in the middle and say, it's kind of like our old diagram that we had earlier, but let's talk about some exercises that we've already been putting together with the Olympiad, because that's something that we've been working on for a long time. So I'm gonna show you our infrastructure as code and our security as code because I can. And then I'm going to show you how you can do these things for yourself, because this is all open source stuff that you can use. You can use every single tool that we use. Our website shows all the stuff that we use, so you can teach yourself everything that I'm talking about. Or the other thing is, the Pi'd Hacker experience that we have on our own website is a DevSecOps class. So if you want to learn DevSecOps from me, then talk to me. I teach DevSecOps, and we have a workshop, basically a self-paced workshop at this time for DevSecOps. But you can also self-teach yourself this stuff if you're that sort who prefers to self-teach things. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. Different people have different preferences of teaching. So for those of you who would rather try to self-teach yourself this stuff, let me show you some ways. Because I don't have 2 months to teach you these things, I'll just kind of show you some rabbit holes to run down. So infrastructure as code and security as code. I'm just going to start by going to my own website because it's easier for me to just show you from my organized resources, because I don't want to have to dig for stuff. So I'm going to go to DIY Engineers here and pull up the Olympiad white paper, and actually it's already open. So I'm just going to scroll through this. I just want it to be bigger. That's all I want. So in the Olympiad white paper, there is this thing that says review Inner Athena Docker Hub resources. Well, we have this Docker item, so if we copy this, or if we just, I guess, click on it, it just opens. So then this brings us to a container that we have produced, and this container is in what's called a container image, and this is, in fact, infrastructure as code, and it also has security as code, because basically you can put it all together into one thing, and that's more or less what we've done here. So I created a container. So let me go back to this whiteboard, and we can just say, oh wait, Docker Hub. It just does everything for us. Let's just make it giant. Docker Hub. And then we pretty much just have everything in like a single container. So, yeah. So you can basically save containers in Docker Hub, and you can save things as separate containers, or you can save everything in one giant container, which is what we did. So we just have one mega container that just has a whole bunch of stuff in it, and it has, you know, tools like Metasploit framework in it. It has tools like Nmap in it. It has Hashcat in it for testing, you know, hashing and stuff like that. It'll do SSH key generation. You know, it's a DevSecOps station. It's a little tool that we use for DevSecOps. So one way that you can learn DevSecOps is, I actually made a game because I get so many questions about this stuff, and then the main questions that I've gotten, I'm just gonna just be like main questions lately, and it's really just like these two big ones, is like how to learn the technical, actually I guess, and teach. So how to learn and teach it. How to learn and teach the technical, and then the other part that we want is basically like how to build your own stuff. I've been getting that question. I'm trying to. I guess I'll just say how to build anything. So, because that's really people are like, how do I build this? How do I build that? How do I build blah, 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 blah. It doesn't really matter. You can use DevSecOps to get a foundation to start building things. So, you know, this could be pen testing or SIM or networking. Who knows? How to build anything, right? How do you build these things? And then also, you know, how do you learn or teach the technical? Networking, SIM. Because building is technical in nature, and then learning technical building things is technical in nature. How do you configure any of these things? So, one of the cool things we've also done to give you a little extra thing that you can learn. I'm just going to go to my own YouTube channel. So if I go to my own YouTube channel, oh look, I can see myself. There is this learn how to hack key. So now, yeah, this is learn how to hack. You can watch this video. It shows, you know, configurations and all this stuff, and this is just like, this is like a straight up game that you can set up with DevSecOps. So setting this game up is DevSecOps. I'll put it that way. That's one way that I'll put that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do DevSecOps live to show you how you can learn pen testing and some cryptography and a little bit of blue team for configuration management. So, and basically I'm going to show you our infrastructure as code and security as code. I'm just going to show you what it looks like, because that's what that is in theory. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour here. But yeah, you can check out our website, by the way, because if anyone's wondering what we do, because I've been talking about all this stuff. If you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, which is an intrapreneur is someone who has goals to not just get like a job and be like, okay, I'm going to have this one job till I die. Like, are you trying to be a CISO, not just get a cybersecurity job till you die? If you're the type to want to progress, you're more of an intrapreneur. Otherwise, if you're trying to start a business, you're an entrepreneur. And if you just want a job, scroll past the testimonials and you'll see that this is free right here. This link is in the description below. But basically, this teaches you the prerequisites for kind of understanding the foundation for what you need to understand DevSecOps. So this stuff that I'm talking about, if you don't understand the stuff that's in this prerequisites package, DevSecOps doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I'm just going to say that. And you'll see that that's an ocean of information in here. This is enough information to get a job. As a matter of fact, this is enough information to get a pretty good job, too. I've had folks get, so some pretty good jobs just out of the Pi'd Hacker Prereqs. So if you just want to get a job, see if you like cybersecurity. Maybe you don't even know if you want to get a job in cybersecurity. This is free. This will tell you everything about the industry more or less, and some things to kind of dip into to kind of get an idea of what's going on with all this stuff. And then free coaching Fridays. Hey, that's today. That's awesome. Anyways, so you can get our infamous hacker hoodies and you can see what we're about. But we help people build cybersecurity, business intelligence, all that good stuff. We're focused on privacy and using SIM technology and DevSecOps. We do privacy engineering with DevSecOps. So I guess I should put that language in here. I've just never... DevSecOps seems like something that's so boring. And so hopefully people don't think DevSecOps is boring, but that's like the most unsexy thing I've ever heard of when I think about like DevSecOps. So it's like, why would I market that? But maybe I should. So I guess they'll start telling people that the boring term. So we do DevSecOps here, and we teach it. We teach you how to engineer it. We teach you how to build a business with it. We teach you how to build a career using DevSecOps. We even teach you basically how to do DevOps for marketing, basically. So we do DevOps for marketing and DevSecOps for cybersecurity, because ultimately we just do a lot of DevOps. We're DevOps everything, I guess. And that includes running a whole business. So if you go to the YouTube channel, I'm going to just go ahead and put this in the link in the Facebook chat. If you're on YouTube, you're already on my YouTube channel, so just go to my YouTube channel and look for this video. But if you're on Facebook, it makes more sense for me to just give you the link. So, alright, there you go. Check that video out. That lets you see how you can play this game that we created from DevSecOps tools. All open source. You can build this at home yourself with all of our own resources. Have fun with it. Go do some cool stuff. Go find some friends to do it with. Go hack each other. Nice. So let's move on to our DevSecOps environment, because we have a DevSecOps environment, and that lives on a Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi 4, I've mentioned this earlier, but for anyone who's doing development on a Raspberry Pi 4, these things are powerful enough to run, you know, do all your DevSecOps for most cybersecurity tools, depending on what you're trying to do. There are exceptions to that, but depending on, especially if you're a newer company, then just start using the more modern technologies. So Raspberry Pi 4 will work with most of the modern technologies for DevSecOps, so you can just use it to build a whole business. Anyways, taking a look at this. The way that this is designed is so that you can play around with it. Notice that I have this thing that says inner DNS control, and then I have this other thing that says inner Athena GUI. This user interface we're looking at is actually Portainer. So if I make well, yeah, it's Portainer. It says it right here. Portainer. You can read that on the screen. And then this inner DNS control is a Pi-hole. So if you want to know how to get this far to where I am here, that's what I was showing on our website, is you want to go look at that Olympiad guide. That Olympiad guide lets you basically set up everything up to having this Athena 0 right here, is what this is. So I am going to do some DevSecOps live, because what I'm going to do is we're going to host a game. So let me tell you what I did. We're going to do our first production, or at least like live production game. So I did straight up DevSecOps for, you know, making sure that it works. And what DevSecOps is, it's kind of like quality assurance. So if you've ever done a quality assurance job, it's real similar. But you want to have like an environment that makes it easy to create and then take things down and test things, and it's rather inconsequential to mess around with stuff. And Docker just makes a really, really, really great solution for that. Because Docker, when you install Portainer, it has this little user interface that you can scroll around in, and this little container list. If you've ever worked with VMware and worked with like virtual machines, you can set the containers up in a way to where you can use them like virtual machines. So like this one that says Athena 0, I can click on this little line and say connect. And then it's going to give us a little terminal that is going to work. Yeah, it's going to work like, what you would expect from a command, from a command terminal. So nothing that new or anything like that. It's just, yeah. Yep. It's like a virtual machine. So anyone who's used to using virtual machines, then virtual machines, for those of you who haven't touched cybersecurity stuff before, maybe go do some research on what a virtual machine is. But for those who are educators who have worked with virtual machines before, the thing about virtual machines is they use up hardware. And a Raspberry Pi, this costs you can get a Raspberry Pi bundle for like $100. And in the case of what we're doing, we have like a little kit here, which we'll be selling at some point. But if you were to go get a Raspberry Pi today, you could go on Amazon and get a Raspberry Pi bundle for $100 on Amazon somewhere. And all this stuff that you can build on here, this is the sort of thing that businesses pay like $8,000 to have someone set this up for you. And I'm telling you, you can do it on a Pi for $100. That's what I'm saying. Instead of paying $8,000 for something like this, you can pay $100 and do it on a Pi with Docker and use containers instead of virtual machines. Now, there's some limitations if you want more than a command prompter. I'm going to say that. So if you want to have like a desktop that looks like, let's see, server desktop. Like if you want access to little desktops where you have the actual windows and stuff and you can click on things, that's not something that's as easy to build in containers. So this is, but you can still buy Raspberry Pis and set up multiple Raspberry Pis if you wanted to have desktops for people to use, which are also still make good workstations. But anyways, you can turn a single Raspberry Pi into a server, because this is the desktop of the Raspberry Pi that's hosting our DevSecOps. So that Portainer GUI we were looking at, that's hosting the Pi on another system. So this is the Raspberry Pi. It's a server. So we're using this Raspberry Pi as a server is what's happening. And then we're connecting to it from a completely different computer. So if I show the other computer again, you say this is a Windows system with a start button and all that fun stuff. So, you can see it's not the Raspberry Pi. So I'm connecting to the Raspberry Pi via, using it as a server. You can see that it looks just like anything else coming from any other server. It's just a lot more affordable and a lot cheaper, especially if you're just trying to learn stuff, or if you're an educator. If you're an educator, you probably don't have unlimited budget to try to teach this stuff. So anyways, that's some random knowledge. So anyways, for anyone who has any questions, I'm just going to stop for a moment and then just see if anyone has any questions. And I might go ahead and at this time hop over to YouTube too. I haven't seen any new questions in Facebook recently, but I also don't ever know if I'm looking at the chat right. But let me hop over and see if there's any questions over on YouTube real quick. And just because since I've answered all the questions that I saw not from YouTube, I actually have some time. So if I have a little time, sometimes I'll see if I can answer a few YouTube questions. But I actually need to prepare for a stream because we're going to play this game. Here we go. So some thoughts from YouTube. Okay, another question from YouTube. After gaining technical knowledge, you want to go and get knowledge about the business side of cybersecurity. Any advice on learning the business side of cybersecurity? Business is business, which is kind of a nice thing. So when we're talking about, because I'm just answering questions before I do some live DevSecOps, because that's going to be real boring. So I want to just answer the rest of the questions that we have before I do get into that. So advice for learning the business side of cybersecurity. Point blank, learn compliance and start with NIST and ISO. I'll just pull those, like Google on my screen so that you can see what those are. So we have NIST framework. So Google what NIST framework is and look up what, cybersecurity framework, NIST, research everything you can about that, and then research ISO compliance. So the next one you want to search for is ISO compliance. So if you're trying to learn more of the business side, I'd say straight up get into that. And then the real thing that's called is it's called GRC. And all this requires DevSecOps anyways. So DevSecOps is kind of where business meets technology, because compliance requires DevSecOps. Why do I know DevSecOps? Because I come from a compliance-heavy background and I was the technical head. And so DevSecOps was my life, because it's like test environment, go, test environment, go, slingshot, back and forth. But if you want to learn the business side of it, then that's GRC all day long. So what's GRC? How it empowers cybersecurity. I mean, there's so many different articles on this, but Google these things. That's a good Google rabbit hole to go down. Maybe I'll just even whiteboard that real quick. So how to learn the business side. So I'll just write these down in sticky so we have. So basically you want to learn compliances, ISO and NIST if you want to learn the business side, and then you want to learn GRC, which stands for governance and something. Why do I always forget what that says? Governance, risk, and compliance. Learn these things, and learn how budgets work. Bam, there you go. This is everything you need to know to start to dabble into the business side of cybersecurity. So learn compliances, ISO and NIST as a foundation, and then learn governance, risk, and compliance. And then governance, risk, and compliance will teach you to use certain frameworks with ISO and NIST, and then understand how budgets work. And then that basically says, like, why do we need DevSecOps? Because of these and these. And then why do we need SIM? Because of these and these. And why do we need pen testing? Because of these and these. So that's overall probably just probably a little bit of a short-lived answer, but these are some rabbit holes you can go down. So hopefully that's helpful. Now, what I'm going to end this session with, instead of doing, just saying bye, is we have theme music, and I'm going to do some actual DevSecOps live. So we've got beats from Rob Flo, DJ Rob Flo. So I'll play this, and then I'll play some songs from Boxcat Games, the Nameless Hackers album. This is an open source album. Open source code, open source music, or royalty free music rather. And we'll go ahead and do some live DevSecOps. So if anyone has any, I'll keep my eye on the Facebook group as I'm actively doing DevSecOps live. So I'm going to be doing DevSecOps to build and prepare for this game on my YouTube channel right here where it says learn how to hack at home with Docker. and the game's called Hide and Hunt. So we're going to start getting set up for the Hide and Hunt game, and maybe I'll even put some text on the screen for that. Let's see. This is a neat little thing. So I got OBS Streamlabs. I've been using that lately, and it's a pretty sweet little tool. If someone's never seen OBS Streamlabs, I'll just show you. This is pretty sweet. So I can set up all the things that I'm doing. So that's how you can see my screen. Anyways, I'll stop doing that. But what I'm doing is I'm putting some text on the screen. So I'll just let you watch me while I'm clicking around at these things, because I need to figure that out. So add text. We're gonna say, oh, I have all these subtitles from previous things. Oh yeah, I need to add this. Alright, so we've got our little powered by Raspberry Pi sign, and I'm going to add a few other things here. This looks crazy right now. Alright, so let's go text edit. Let me just make a note that I'm just doing live DevSecOps right now so folks know what I'm doing. Here we go. This will be neat. Look at that. Let's give it a little banner. Sweet. Okay, so I'll just leave that in the corner of the screen. And we're gonna do some DevSecOps for Hack and Hunt live because we can. Yeah, that's the real answer. Okay, so let me explain what I'm going to do while I'm doing this, because what we're going to do is after I do this, we're actually going to do a separate stream. We're going to do a production stream of Hack and Hunt, of the Nato Point team playing Hack and Hunt live. All of us. So that should be a pretty fun little time. That's coming up pretty soon. So in order for us to be able to play Hack and Hunt, if you ever build the Inner Athena documentation, so once again, I'll go to the top from where this is. So if you go to our website, notiapoint.com, I'll navigate there. Scroll down to DIY for DIY engineers. And we have where it says the Olympiad. And then this guide, if you just go through this and read this guide and go through everything that you build in here, then it's going to tell you how to build this thing called Athena 0 right here. That is an admin node. So for Hack and Hunt, I actually need to do some DevSecOps to also create some documentation. So part of DevSecOps is creating documentation, which I do in Discord. So I'm just going to do DevSecOps the way that I do it, which, yeah, why not? So I just go to Discord. So DevSecOps is all about just doing things that make it easier for you to do your development. And so when I'm doing stuff with other people where I want them to have access to what I'm doing, then I'll go ahead and throw things in the Discord where we have an open source community. And this, for the most part, is where if someone joins the Pi'd Hacker experience, they end up in here. If they are a partner, they end up in here. Just really depends on what you're doing. But anyways, the folks who come into... there we go, let me make that a little bigger. But yeah, I use Discord for my coding. Or for my coding. So when you're using Linux, I'll zoom in on this since it's real tiny. And you're trying to figure out how to build like scripts and things like that. It's helpful to have something that lets you save commands that you plan on using over and over again. And so some people will use, TXT files. Some folks will use Slack, like Slack channels for work, so that's a pretty common thing. And then, yeah, so, different people use different tools. Ultimately, that's what that is. So what I need to do is I need to grab a few other specific things, and then this is also where I keep notes. So anyone who's joined the Pi'd Hacker experience, you have access to all of my DevSecOps notes, and I don't know if any of you even have ever known what that is, but the Notia Point Research Madness section is all of my DevSecOps work. So if anyone's curious. Like I said, from here on out, it's going to be doing DevSecOps for Hack and Hunt Live, which is probably not going to be the most exciting. So at this point, I'm not going to be focused on entertaining. I'm going to be focused on completing this, and you guys can see what it looks like when someone's doing their job. It's probably not the most exciting job. So anyways, this Athena 0 right here, I'll commentary while I do this, is the administrator node. So this one has access to the Raspberry Pi environment running everything. So I don't actually need to try to access the Raspberry Pi from my Docker environment any other way. That's just the point of the Athena 0 container, is it lets me talk to the stuff. Oh, and some questions. Yeah, if people do have questions, I'll keep answering questions while I do this. Why not? So another question: do technical roles pay more in cybersecurity, or do business roles pay more? Technical roles pay less. Well, that's not true. This is complicated. Technical roles have diminishing returns depending on what kinds of technical roles you go into. If you become a principal engineer, then you are in somewhat of a technical business role. So you're still kind of more business than technical. So the further you go up the food chain in a business, you do less and less technical work, and you have to understand what the people who do technical work do. So having an understanding of what technical people do, if you're trying to become like a CISO or something, matters more than knowing how to do technical stuff. If you want to be a CISO, you don't have to work a lick of code in your life. Not really. You just have to be someone who understands how to work very well with teams, understands how to work with technical heads, and understands how to work with people who will compensate for the things that you don't know. So, anyways, but yeah, anyways, this DevSecOps article is really convenient. It's something that I've been sharing with folks. Another thing that's really convenient is I have this containers making infrastructure as code easier. I should actually add some of these links to some of the chat sometime. But anyone who's in Discord, there's this information in here you have. But anyways, I hope that information's helpful. The technical roles pay. Yeah, business roles pay more. It's just how it works. Because the people who generate the capital and understand how to generate the capital can do things to negotiate their pay up and up and up, as to where at some point with technical stuff, you can end up in a scenario where You don't even know why you are doing the technical work you do. You just know that it has enough demand to pay you six figures, and it has enough demand for, people to not fire you, because it makes you, pretty irreplaceable. But it makes it really hard to move around in a company. If you're like an admin and you're making $120,000 a year, you're not going to be getting any promotions, and you're not going to become the CISO. An admin's not going to become the CISO. The admin's almost too important. In some ways, if an admin wants to become a CISO or some other role, they have to quit and go to another company, and kind of. But then that's switching over from technical to business. If you're switching from being an admin to something else, and an admin is also sort of a business-driven role too. So I hope that answers a little bit about the business side. So let's see. So Athena 0. I'm going to go ahead and keep configuring this stuff. All right. So like I said, this is going to be kind of probably pretty boring. So I'm just gonna turn up the music, and until someone asks questions or something, I'm gonna jam, and I'll talk every now and then to explain some of what I'm doing. So let me click back. I'm going to recreate all of these little Athenas. So where it says Athena 4, Athena 3, Athena 2, Athena 1. These were all tests to play the hide and hunt game. So I'm just going to go select these and say goodbye. And then the way that these containers work is I have this pie hole that they all talk to. So if I go to, actually, so we can take a look at what's going on with all of the DNS queries, which that's something that I'm not going to show for too long, because who knows what information's in there, but that might privacy stuff, because there's like business IPs and stuff like that. So I got to be careful what I show, because technically there's business activity in some of these environments. But I'm not going to show something that's going to put my business in jeopardy. But either way, I do have, let's see, let me adjust that. Haha. There. That's better. Here we go. So we can basically look at some metrics for DNS queries associated with the clients doing things. So while we're playing the game hide and hunt, then we can actually see, who's connected to who, where, and what the rate of activity looks like. And I'll probably flush out all the activity here so that all of the activity ends up being from just the game. Or I might just leave it and just see what it all looks like. But that's what this is. That's what that inner DNS control is for. It's just a little bit of data generation around some stuff. Anyways, I am going to log into this thing. And I need to log into the core host. So this is the Inner Athena Olympiad Quick Start Guide. This is what I'm scrolling through right now. So I'm going to modify some code. So infrastructure is code. So like I said, right now I'm just more focused on doing this, so I might not make a whole lot of sense what I'm doing. Just talk to myself while I do this. Maybe I should just turn the music up. That's what I'm going to do. Let me just play a series of songs. Let's just take it off of loop and listen to some jams. Music. There we go. I didn't even notice the music wasn't even playing. There we go. Made everything look better. Okay, so what I just did is generate player nodes. Is what this Athena 1, Athena 2, Athena 3, Athena test. These are going to be used to make sure that the players are going to be able to participate and play. And so there's a couple of things we need to do. Is I need to now set up the access for players to play. But that's what I just did. I just went ahead and deleted all of the Athenas from our old test game run. And now we're going to do a live hackathon, basically playing hide and hunt. So we're going to have a hide and hunt hackathon is what we're going to do with the Notia Point team. And I'm the only one who's played hide and hunt, so they aren't going to know how to play the game. So I'm going to have to create a little bit of guidance. Actually, I do have a little bit of guidance because I threw it in here somewhere. I don't know what I'm doing with this. Edit. So here we go. HA design. Where did I play this game? Here we go. So this is how I do all of my early documentation before it turns into like a white paper or something like this. So DevSecOps, like this is the sort of thing that you do is either you can do things in a text document, but generally like documentation and white papers don't come until you've done a lot of this stuff. And one thing about DevSecOps is if you do it well, you document everything along the way and you just document everything. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that the documentation for the players to participate is enough, which it seems to be fine. I might have to teach them how to play the game first. So I'll probably make a better looking little guide with steps, and we'll use this. I created this Athena test right here, and I'm going to use this Athena test node, and I'm going to do all of the setup stuff with it, and then I'm going to attack the Athena test with Athena 0, which is the admin node. I don't even know if you can hear me over the music, but yeah. Let's do this. All right. All right. I'm going to continue doing this. So I need to clean up this documentation for the players. So if you're doing DevSecOps, that means that when something's about to go into production, then you need to make sure that it's user-friendly and stuff like that. So make sure that everyone who's going to be touching it knows what's going on with it. And so like you can learn DevSecOps by playing games with friends, and setting up the game is DevSecOps. Setting up the games and then doing all of the testing and then delivering it, that's a full DevSecOps cycle. So if you were to just set up Olympiad, test out the game, and then play it with friends, DevSecOps, which is also what Pi'd Hacker Experience is built on. So anyways, I'm going to continue developing this thing out here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this Athena test. I'm going to go ahead and just keep doing my thing, and I'm just going to turn the music up. So I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up the stream. Basically, I finally went ahead and just did some testing. So the point of DevSecOps is to just kind of go over everything with a little bit of a fine-tooth comb, test it all, go see what's going on with the configurations, make sure the configurations look good, make sure they're exactly as you want it, and then ultimately you can save those configurations. So it starts out as, you know, you come in here and you just write out what's supposed to happen. And this is the birth of writing a script and writing, you know, automation, is you write a methodology first. So for us, we have a methodology, so on and so forth. And then once you have your methodology, then if you have something like a game that you're working on and you're doing DevSecOps, well, in this case, it's a game, but in real life, it'd be like a security tool or something. And if you're provisioning a tool, then still you want to write down your commands, because this is what allows you to automate. If you're writing a whole bunch of commands and you're not saving them somewhere and you're not making little notes on what you're doing, you're missing out on just like a whole lot. And so then this is basically you know, the foundation of, you can start to build software out of this. And software engineering then just becomes a compilation of just like putting the right parts in the right places. Now, of course, like, there are different forms of software engineering. This is DevSecOps. You know, you could get a lot more codey than this if you're trying to do like Python, trying to do certain things. But right now, I'm just building something that makes for a quick exercise to learn cybersecurity stuff, cryptography, the basics. So for just like a foundational run through, what I've done is I've used this Athena 4 as a test container, and then we have player 1, 2, and 3 that we're going to be using. So now the last thing I need to do is just create users for all these. So users. So I already have a few users, which I think I'm just going to go ahead and recreate these. And then I'm just going to make new players. So I'm going to say okay, so making some player accounts. Alright, so then players, we're going to be able to play this game now, so this is pretty sweet. So we have player 1, 2, 3, and then I'm just going to assign these players to their thing. So player 1, let's just go change ownership. Player 1. And so this is last, but you just want to make sure everything works. That's DevSecOps for you. And then ultimately, I'll spin up scripts for all this stuff too at the end of the day. So that I don't have to go and create users for all this. So DevSecOps, it's like, test it out manually first. And then when you build things, then over time, you end up with a collection of code. And you can just start building applications and software, so bam, now we have a game that's playable. And I could say, for example, so we could log in as Athena 1, and this player should only have access to, So once again, this is the purpose of DevSecOps. So I have misconfigured all of these containers, so I just need to make one final configuration and just say change ownership. Take the team off. So 1, 2. All right. Yeah, Jordan, this game's ready to go. I just tested the users. The last user's set up. Yeah, so go ahead and tell Laura we're ready to play, and I'll end this stream, and then I'll set up the thing for the thing, and we'll roll.
Okay, sounds good.
Sweet. Okay, so now let's see if this is fixed. There you go. Let's see. Ha. Okay, there you go. So this is what it should look like. So you want to make sure, like, so the players, moving the wrong thing. What am I moving? Hold on. Okay, so I'm gonna move my head here. Oh, you can't really even see it. Well, I'll just drag the screen. So this shows that I'm logged into the Athena 1 user here, while this other one is logged in as admin there, as you can see. There we go. Yeah. Well, sweet. There's some DevSecOps live for you. Hopefully that's kind of exciting. I don't know if cybersecurity is exciting to other people, but like to me this is just like my job, so I'm like, okay. Maybe someone else thinks this is interesting. No, I do enjoy doing it. I think it's a pretty fun job. I think it's pretty neat. If I'm gonna work, I want to play with hardware all day long and be able to like make cool stuff. So, you know, this is my kind of career, I guess. So anyways, I've now set up this game for people to play. And what I did the whole time with DevSecOps is I kind of ran through all the commands on the game, ran through everything on it, ran through all the configurations, ran through it, like full-on QA'd it. And then, you know, made sure that it's ready to go. And then since the game is something that we're going to be testing continuous delivery on, it's sort of like a DevSecOps like stress test. So you could think of this as like a DevSecOps bench, I guess. It's just like a quick little see how you can do DevSecOps with this tool, or try doing DevSecOps with that tool. And so you can set this game up with different DevSecOps tools. So yeah, basically hide and hunt is somewhat of a DevSecOps benchmark, I guess. However have you, if that's what you'd like to call it. So maybe at some point we might test different open source tools and try games like hide and hunt, and maybe we might come up with different DevSecOps benchmarks to see what kinds of practices seem to be a little more efficient for like configurations and quick setup and quick prep and stuff like that. So, you know, just really see like how fast can you spin things up and down. And one of the things that we're going to be using is Terraform, which is not something that I'm using right now yet, but there you go. So anyways, I'm going to ask real quick before it's the end of the day, because DevSecOps Live is ending here. If anyone has any last questions, then feel free to ask. We're going to start playing the game live, so I'm going to get off pretty quickly here soon, but I don't mind asking a last question or two if I catch one. But like I said, it's about that time that we play. So if you sit tight, we'll go ahead and just spin up a new stream, and the new stream is going to have Jordan, Laura, and myself going through and playing our game. Oh, and you know what? I need to create a new inner DNS control right here. So I'm not quite done yet. I'm almost done. I will be done real fast here though. So let's close that. And let's go to the Olympiad and regenerate our inner DNS control, because I want to make it so I can show those metrics without it showing anything sensitive on our network. I have a pretty segregated network. I'm just gonna scrub this. Okay, so I'm just gonna recreate this thing. Okay, so now let's see. So this is the final part. Really, I was just setting up the pie hole. So let's see if that's alive again. Yeah, look at that. I gotta give it a password again. So where is that? Okay, so let's just see. Let's log into this. There it is, and the clients are connected to it. So bam, we got it all. This is gonna be fresh. So there's our Athena 1, 2, and 3 showing up on the pie hole. Yeah, it's there. It's pretty sweet. There we go. Security information event management right here from Pi-hole in your face. Everything you've ever wanted, I guess, in life. It's all your security information event management. So this is a good way to learn security information and event management, by the way. I just updated the Pi-hole, so I guess they haven't updated this image because this is supposed to be how you update the Pi-hole, and there it goes saying, update available. So maybe I'll just go over here and do a gravity update real quick. So once again, DevSecOps things, I just discovered an issue with Pi-hole on their end, which is something that I can figure out how to fix because of DevSecOps. If I were to deploy this in the wild, I need to know this, like if it was like being used for a business, because they have to understand how are they going to properly update Pi-hole, and my little update format failed. It failed. So that's DevSecOps. That's why you do it. You do it so that you can find out if it even works in the first place, so that you don't find out if something doesn't work in production, because that's a bad idea. That's the worst idea, as a matter of fact. So, anyways, that brings us to the end of everything. So we're gonna play the game now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.